Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining Authors on the Air. I'm your host, Deborah Ledford, and I'm thrilled to present Linda Hurtado Bond on the program. Say hello to the folks, Linda.
Hi, everybody. So glad you're here listening.
Yes. All the Missing Girls. Okay, I'm going to hold it up because it's a really fun cover. Look at that, right? It's book 2 from your All the Broken Girls series.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your latest book and the lead character, Mari Alvarez?
Absolutely. So Mari is a crime reporter. I decided to write about something I know. I'm a TV news reporter by day, write thrillers by night. And she goes to Cuba with her photographer friend, Orlando, and a homicide detective in Tampa, who she's hooked up with to solve a case in book 1, because her sister has gone missing. And she believes her sister is with an ex-boyfriend that fled to Cuba after their mother was murdered. And so she fears for her sister's safety and goes looking for her. But if you know anything about Cuba, it's not easy to get in. And certainly they didn't want to be followed around the island by police or the government. So they snuck into Cuba late at night into a private marina, which, by the way, I wouldn't suggest doing. This is just fiction, yes. And went on a search for her sister. And during that search, they discovered that other girls about her sister's age were going missing on the island. And it all led back to this fantastical place called Ocean Villa in Cuba, which is actually based on a real place. Maybe we can talk about. And as she's searching for her sister, she discovers other missing girls. And then it's a race against the clock to save them and get back to America before they're captured and kept in Cuba. So that's basically the plot of this thriller.
Spectacular. So the settings are fantastic.
Thank you.
They're fascinating. I had the opportunity to go there for a scuba trip quite a while ago, where we were permitted one day on the island. It was like an 8-hour window of time, and they showed us only what they wanted to show us. But we had just a glorious time. Why did you decide on Cuba for your series location? Because book 1 also takes place there.
Yes. So I met my husband when I was reporting in Cuba, and it was back in 1997 when Fidel Castro was still in charge, and he invited Pope John Paul II to come to the island. And he invited people back that left the island to come back without any repercussions for this photo op or whatever you want to call it. And so some people in Tampa that hadn't been back in 30 years got together in a group with St. Paul's Catholic Church, and they went back home and saw their relatives for the first time in 30 years. What a story,
Wow.
right? So I sat down next to a gentleman in St. Paul's Catholic Church here in Tampa for the very first meeting, and he told me about his family. So there are 4 brothers, and only 2 would go back with his parents while Fidel Castro was in charge. He wanted to go because he wanted to see the island through the eyes of his parents. And I thought that was a fantastic story, because decades after the revolution ended, Fidel Castro was still dividing families.
No.
And so I followed his family to Cuba, interviewed him and his parents. And then about 2 years later, I married him.
So that's a great story.
Yeah, and
so I love that.
I love Cuba. I love the effect it had on my life. My children, all 5 of them, have been raised in the Cuban American community in Tampa. And in fact, we adopted one of his relatives from Cuba. So just Cuba is interwoven in my life in so many ways and so dear to my heart. So I wanted to show the world parts of Cuba, because as you know, even if you get into Cuba, you're very isolated in what you'll be able to see.
Oh, yes.
Often. So I wanted to pull the curtain back and take readers to a place they've probably never seen.
Oh, and you do such a magnificent job. It's like, is this real? I think this is real. So much through the book. So you have won, now it may be updated now, but what I have with research I did, you won 13 Emmys, an Edward R. Murrow Award, Associated Press Awards, and many more for your work as a journalist. And now you feature Mari, as you mentioned, who is she's a reporter. How much of what you've encountered professionally have you featured in your series?
Well, it bleeds over, no pun intended. I write thrillers.
Yeah.
Certainly, I've been to Cuba a number of times. The Ocean Via, this fantastical place I set, is based on a real place that I visited. It's outside of Havana, Cuba, and it is a community where an artist lives, and he's just changed this entire beach town into a giant work of art. He does mosaics and tiles, and it's like something you've never seen. It's beautiful. And so I've actually visited that place myself. And so when I wrote about Ocean Via, I changed things up, obviously, because it has a darker twist. But I've actually been there. So I've also reported in Cuba and had the government following me and all of that. And so there are a lot of things in All the Missing Girls that I take from real life.
Yeah, you mentioned Ocean Via. So, and you take us, through, step by step, precisely, really, as I imagine Mari would take. And so is it like a clandestine location, or do you have to be a resident to get in to see the place? How did you get in there?
That's what I loved about it. Like, he opened his house, the actual real life artist opened his house for people to come to. You can walk around his house and I don't remember paying a thing, right? Now, if you want to buy his artwork, you can buy it. So I loved the idea in fiction of this like Disneyland type tourist attraction where you can walk around by day, right? And then when the sun sets, it takes on a very sinister turn. And then the security cameras come on, and now you can't get in, because what happens at night, and I don't want to give anything away, but what happens at night is rather horrific. And then the next day, the sun comes out and it shines on this fantastical fantasy land again. And all the tourists that walk around during the day really have no idea what they're walking past. And that's the cool thing for the reader to discover, right?
Right. Yeah, I won't give anything away, but you feature a type of artwork that is jaw-dropping. It's literally like, what?
I've never been horror either, but someone told me you have beta readers while you're writing. And one of my beta readers told me, I didn't realize you liked horror. And I like, am I writing horror? She's like, yeah, it's pretty horrific. So, right. So I embraced that. And I actually listened to Stephen King's The Shining while I was writing this book, because I just wanted to listen to a master at horror. Right. And so, yeah, the next book is not horror, though. I like to try different things on as a writer. So.
Well, even just the idea of missing women, missing people, that's a horrific subject matter to cover. So, so even though it may not be slasher type of situation,
right?
It's still horrifying to think of the actuality of what is really going on.
I think it's horrifying to lose someone and not know what happens, and just just the question mark of it is
right. How do you go on? But and how did that element come to you? Just because of the actual artwork that is there, as far as the horrific artwork that we're talking about covertly?
Well, this is a series, and I want to All the Broken Girls, which over this shoulder was the first book. So the character, book one ends with the sister disappearing. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to write, I knew there were 3 books in this series, at least 3 books. And so I had to end on a cliffhanger, but I write all my books as standalones too. So if you pick up book 2 or even book 3 and you haven't read the first 2, you'll be fine. But it's the same characters, right? So the 2 things I started with was Mari's sister disappears. Where does she go? Well, I want to write about Cuba. I knew I wanted to write about Cuba. So she's going to Cuba. And then what place in Cuba will make this book unlike any other written about Cuba? And I've never read a book that features this part of Cuba. So I felt like it would be an adventure for the readers. So that's what I started with, those 2 elements, missing sister and a place where she is missing too. And then I built the rest of it around that.
Oh, it's so fascinating. And then because the sister, Izzy is a bit of a train wreck, right?
Yes, she is.
Not sure really if she is missing, but,
right.
Mari, throws, intrigue in, and she literally risks her life in the process, right?
Yes.
She brings 2 cohorts with her. She's got her sidekicks, and but what we don't do for family, right?
That's another theme. And if you know anything about the Cuban American community, they're very family oriented.
Right.
Often families grow up in the same neighborhood and never leave. Like you might have the house at the end of the block and your mom has the house in the middle of the block and your cousin lives down the street. Right. And you know, everybody comes to birthday parties and everybody comes to Noche Buena. And it's just, that's instilled in you from the moment you enter this world. And so I wanted to address that theme. What would you do for your family? And for Mari, she would do anything, because if you read book 1, you realize that her sister is at the end of that book, her only living relative left. Right. So what would you do for the last living family member? You risk your life. You'd enter Cuba illegally. You do some things that were questionable and take risks. You would do everything, because, you know, she is your life. She is she's your family.
She's it. And Mari's cameraman, Orlando, and you mentioned Detective Tony Garcia. They accompany her to search for Izzy, because they become their family too. I mean, certainly not by blood, but certainly by, you know, they're drawn together, and, you know, they'll, you know, keeping each other safe, really, right? And they're the ideal mystery solving trio. I mean, really, you know, when one or more of them break from the pack, it enhances a threat level. Several times Mari is looking for Izzy alone, where she's vulnerable and unsure how to proceed, you know, so she relies on her professional experience. But, you know, again, that's the tightness of family and the family that you choose. Right.
Exactly. It was also important to me. I wanted to have 3 main characters in a book that were characters of color, Tony Garcia is Hispanic, Cuban American, as is Mari, and Orlando is an African American. And I just love the idea of really representing a community the way it's really represented in real life. Right. So I love the way that people have embraced these characters. And I hear all the time how people love diving into the Cuban American culture. Like food is a big part of it. So there are many scenes that you actually walk into the kitchen and smell what Mari is smelling.
You made me very hungry.
Right. And that's all part of it. And then the religious aspect of it is also a very big part of it. It's not preachy religious at all, but that's a big part of the Cuban American culture. So I included it. Festivals and the local market where you go shopping, and all of these things I thought richened up the book, but also kind of pulled back, I guess, the window shade on a community that if you're not born in it or raised in it, then you probably don't really see it. Right. And that's what I wanted to do as well.
Right. Yeah. And I'm an author, a Native American author, so I so appreciate you presenting characters of color, because, you know, it's real life. You know, come on, people, this is real, right?
So somebody else's culture. I mean, I just love that. Like, that's a real adventure, and we need more of that.
Culture and traditions. Now, during Mari's journey, and you touched on this a little bit, you introduced us to the dark side of Cuban religion. Tell us more about Santeria.
Right. So in book 1, it was important for me to introduce Santeria and make people understand that it's just a religion. It's not evil, right? I was introduced to it, Santeria, because my mother-in-law, one time when my daughter got sick, came out with a prayer and read a prayer, and then told me about the Azabachi charm and how it's and this whole idea of the evil eye, like someone is wishing your child ill will, and it may not even be intentional. They may be jealous or envy or whatever, and that this prayer protects the child, right? So that was kind of my first introduction into it, because although my dad is Hispanic, he's Guatemalan, his family's from Guatemala. So I was not raised in the Cuban American culture. So I was fascinated by that. So Santeria was born because many African slaves that were brought to Cuba wanted to practice their African religion, but they would be persecuted for doing that. So they attached their religion to Catholic saints, like Saint Barbara was attached to Chango. And so that was a way for them to practice in plain sight, while kind of hiding what they were actually doing, right? So it really was just a chance to practice your faith, right? Brujeria Now that's different. That is kind of, so if you say a prayer with good intentions, right, to help somebody, to help yourself, to help your family, that would be Santeria. Now, if you're saying a prayer to wish someone evil, maybe to get rid of an enemy, or your intent is bad, I think it's really focused on your intent. Then it becomes brujeria, which is a form of witchcraft. And so that's kind of what we explore in the second book, is where that line is crossed and why it's crossed, and maybe even the backstory. It's like there's always a root of evil, right?
Right.
So you have to go trace it back and see when and where it switches from something good to something bad.
And that's what makes a great thriller, because it's, that's why this character is reverting to this, rather than the sunshine and goodness toward
the motivation. There's always motivation.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. This is great. You create weather brilliantly. I mean, I remember on the scuba yacht, and those clouds would come rolling in. It's like, are we safe out here? I'd love to read just a little snippet from All the Missing Girls, chapter 3. Turbulent clouds tumble upward, the morning humidity suffocating before the afternoon thunderstorms build and break. Mother Nature's way of releasing its energy. I mean, that just conjures so many visuals, and also, helps us to understand what Mari is going through at the time.
Setting the mood of a scene, I think, is so important. A thunderstorm, a building thunderstorm is building, the tension is building, and at some point it's going to explode and release, right? Like an afternoon thunderstorm. Or if it's a bright sunny day and the butterfly drifts past, it's a totally different mood. And I really like to set the scene for what's to come in the first few paragraphs of a chapter, so people know kind of a foreshadowing of what's coming.
Right. It's brilliant. Now, and you implement the ticking clock to perfection. I mean, like every great thriller, and you even have to reset the clock a couple of times, because a little bit more time is being bought, thankfully, because you still haven't found Izzy. Mari still hasn't found Izzy. Did knowing Mari and her team have only a short window of time help you decide when and where the scenes take place?
Absolutely. And I kind of like to drive my chapters forward with almost a formula, which I hate to say, but if you're writing a thriller and there has to be a ticking clock. I mean, I don't think it gives anything away to say we start with 48 hours, and there's a reason. It's like, okay, the guy who brought them by boat there says, I'm coming back in 48 hours. And if you're not here, I'm leaving. You're stuck on the island. And that's not a good thing. So, immediately the clock starts ticking. And it does change throughout the book because situations change. But I think you drive a story forward when there's a deadline. And I'm so used to a deadline as a reporter that I like having that in all of my books. I think in all of my thrillers, you'll see that the clock starts ticking on page 1.
I mean, you even right here. I mean, you in the formatting, which is brilliant. Chapter 37, day 4, after midnight, 6 hours till extraction. You're already ramping up that intensity and that apprehension. It's like, oh man, we gotta get Izzy and get out of here. Okay, well, this has been so much fun and so insightful and interesting and fascinating. Linda Hurtado Bond, All the Missing Girls. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate it. We just want to ask you one quick thing. What do you have coming up that you're excited about?
Well, Mari, I don't want to give too much away, but I will say that Mari lives on to go on another adventure. And this one takes us to Tampa, back to Tampa, in the West Tampa neighborhood in Ybor City. And it happens during the pirate festival that is known as Gasparilla in Tampa. And it's really starts in January, ends in March. And it's like a 6-week long festival where people dress up as pirates, and there's parades and music festivals. And it's just this fantastical, again, I like all this fantastical stuff. People dress as pirates. They have face makeup on. Wouldn't that be the perfect place for a killer to hide in plain sight, right?
Yes.
Like something bad happens and you look around, they all look like bad guys. They're pirates.
They're pirates.
And then I wanted to explore the whole idea of artificial intelligence and how today, if someone's really good at AI, they can put you at the scene of a crime and they can make it look like you've done bad things, and
Wow.
it'll go viral, 1 million views in a couple of days.
Right.
And then what do? Now, instead of being innocent until proven guilty, you're guilty until you can prove your innocence.
Oh,
So that's kind of the
wow.
point of all the captive girls. And
That's going to be so great. I can't wait for it. I'm so excited for you. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us, Linda. And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time.